In the opulent Ashby Hall, a scream shatters the night. Genius composer Victor Langston lies dead in a locked music room, his revolutionary score stolen. Hercule Poirot unravels a web of ambition, jealousy, and betrayal among a volatile conductor, a bitter rival, and a devoted student. Cyanide in the wine, a hidden great, a missing masterpiece. Who orchestrated this deadly symphony? The truth awaits in the silent score. Chapter 1. The Locked Room. The November wind howled through the village of St. Mary's Mead, tugging at the bare branches of ancient oaks and rattling the leaded windows of Ashby Hall. Hercule Poirot, his neatly pressed overcoat buttoned against the chill, stepped from the chauffeured car with a fastidious air. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, clutched his hat as a gust threatened to send it skittering across the gravel drive. They had been invited by Sir Reginald Ashby, a wealthy patron of the arts, to attend a private concert showcasing a new symphony by the celebrated composer Victor Langston. Poirot, though retired, could not resist the allure of a musical evening, nor the promise of intellectual stimulation in the company of England's cultural elite. The hall's interior was a vision of opulence. Polished mahogany panels gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the scent of beeswax mingled with the faint musk of old books. Sir Reginald, a rotund man with mutton chop whiskers and a booming voice, greeted them in the drawing-room. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, a delight, he exclaimed, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Tonight, you shall hear genius, Langston's latest work, a symphony to rival Beethoven." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with polite interest, though his sharp gray eyes scanned the room, noting the assembled guests. A mix of local gentry, musicians, and a few nervous-looking servants. As the party adjourned to the music room for a rehearsal, Poirot observed the composer himself, Victor Langston, a lean man with feverish eyes and ink-stained fingers. Langston sat at the grand piano, his hands dancing over the keys as he guided the small ensemble through a passage of soaring strings and haunting woodwinds. The music was extraordinary, even in its unfinished state, and Poirot, no stranger to beauty, felt a stirring in his methodical soul. "Magnifique," he murmured to Hastings, who nodded, entranced, but the harmony was shattered by a piercing scream. It came from the direction of the music room, where the rehearsal had just concluded. The guests froze, then surged toward the sound, Poirot leading with a surprising nimbleness. The music room door, heavy oak with an ornate brass lock, was shut fast. Sir Reginald pounded on it, calling Langston's name, but no answer came. The butler, Perkins, a gaunt man with a perpetually sour expression, produced a key and unlocked the door after a moment's fumbling. Inside, the scene was grim. Victor Langston lay slumped over the piano, his head resting on the keys, which emitted a faint, discordant hum. His face was pale, his eyes staring blankly, and a thin trickle of saliva glistened at the corner of his mouth. A glass of red wine sat on the piano's polished surface, its contents half drunk, glinting in the lamplight. The room was otherwise empty, its windows bolted shut, the air heavy with a faint, bitter scent. Like almonds, Poirot noted with a frown. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, stepping forward. He touched Langston's wrist, finding it cold and pulseless. "He is dead, Hastings." The guests gasped, and a woman, later identified as Clara Vane, a rival composer, stifled a sob. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloging every detail. The neatly arranged sheet music on a stand, the untouched violin on a chair, and, most curiously, the absence of Langston's latest score, which Sir Reginald had described as a masterpiece. A small desk beside the piano, where Langston had been working, was bare save for a few pencils and an empty ink bottle. Poirot turned to the butler. "This door, it was locked from the inside, oui?" Perkins nodded, his hands trembling slightly. "And the windows?" Poirot gestured to the heavy drapes. A footman hurried to check, confirming that each bolt was secure. "A locked room," Poirot mused, his voice low but resonant. "Yet a man is dead, and his work is gone. This is no mere tragedy. It is a crime." Hastings, his face pale, leaned closer. "Poison, do you think? That smell?" Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the wine glass. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the how and the why, these are the questions that stir the little gray cells." He addressed the room, his tone commanding, yet calm. "No one is to leave this house. We await the police, but until then, Hercule Poirot will begin to unravel this mystery." As murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd, Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised to be as intricate as the missing score itself. Chapter 2. The Players in the Drama. The drawing room of Ashby Hall, with its high ceilings and walls adorned with somber portraits, seemed to close in upon the assembled company as Hercule Poirot took his place by the marble fireplace. The air was thick with tension, the crackle of the fire the only sound breaking the oppressive silence that followed the discovery of Victor Langston's body. Captain Hastings stood near the window, his honest face etched with unease, while the guests, musicians, patrons, and servants alike, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Poirot, his small frame radiating authority, surveyed the room with eyes that missed nothing. His mustache, impeccably trimmed, quivered slightly as he clasped his hands behind his back, preparing to address the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice clear and precise, with the faintest trace of his Belgian accent. "We are confronted with a crime most heinous. Victor Langston, a man of genius, lies dead, and his final work, a score of unparalleled brilliance, we are told, is missing. This is no accident. It is murder, and the thief walks among us." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly stifled as Poirot raised a hand. "I, Hercule Poirot, will assist the police when they arrive, but until then, I ask that you remain here, in this house, and answer my questions with truth. The little gray cells, they are already at work, and they will not rest until the puzzle is solved." Sir Reginald Ashby, seated in a high-backed armchair, mopped his brow with a handkerchief. His jovial demeanor had vanished, replaced by a pallor that made his whiskers seem even more pronounced. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice trembling, "this is a catastrophe. Langston was to premiere his symphony here under my patronage. Who could do such a thing?" Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. "That, Sir Reginald, is what we shall discover. But first, I must know the players in this drama. Who was in the house this evening, and what was their connection to the deceased?" Sir Reginald, eager to assist, rose and gestured to the three individuals who had been closest to Langston in life, and perhaps in death. Poirot's eyes followed each introduction, his mind cataloguing every gesture, every flicker of expression. The first was Maestro Julien Fournier, a conductor of some renown, whose flamboyant presence seemed at odds with the grim mood. Fournier was a Frenchman, tall and lean, with a shock of dark hair streaked with silver and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's in elegance, though it lacked the same precision. His eyes, dark and intense, darted about the room, and his hands moved restlessly, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Sir Reginald explained that Fournier had been chosen to lead the premiere of Langston's symphony, a decision that had sparked heated disputes between the two men. "Fournier is a genius with the baton," Sir Reginald said, but he and Langston often clashed over the interpretation of the score. Fournier stood, bowing slightly to Poirot. "Monsieur, I am devastated by this loss. Victor was difficult, yes, but a visionary. I would never harm him." His voice carried a theatrical flourish, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his fingers, a sign of nerves, or perhaps something more. Next was Clara Vane, a composer whose star had once shone brightly, but had dimmed in the shadow of Langston's brilliance. She was a woman of middle years, with sharp cheekbones and auburn hair pulled tightly into a bun. Her green eyes held a glint of defiance, and her lips were set in a thin line, as if she resented the scrutiny. Sir Reginald described her as a rival to Langston, whose latest work had been eclipsed by his. "Clara is talented," he said carefully, but she felt Victor received undue favor. They were not friends. Clara rose, her movements graceful but deliberate. "I had no love for Victor Langston," she said, her voice low and steady. "He was a thief of ideas, passing off others' work as his own. But murder? That is beneath me." Her gaze met Poirot's, unflinching, yet there was a hardness there that intrigued him. The final suspect was Edmund Price, a young man of barely 20, with a mop of sandy hair and a nervous disposition. His hands fidgeted in his lap, and his eyes, wide and blue, seemed to plead for understanding. Sir Reginald introduced him as Langston's student, a prodigy who had studied under the composer for 2 years. "Edmund worshipped Victor," Sir Reginald said, "though I've heard him say he felt stifled, as if Victor held him back." Edmund stood awkwardly, his cheeks flushing. "Mr. Langston was my mentor," he stammered. "He was everything to me. I could never hurt him." His voice cracked, and he sat quickly, avoiding Poirot's piercing stare. Poirot nodded, his mind already turning over the dynamics of this trio. Each had a connection to Langston, each a potential motive. Fournier's ambition, Clara's jealousy, Edmund's frustration, any could have led to murder. But the missing score, that was the enigma. Why take it unless it held a value beyond mere notes on a page? He turned to Sir Reginald. "Tell me, monsieur, of this score. Why was it so extraordinary?" Sir Reginald's eyes lit up, despite the circumstances. "It was revolutionary, Monsieur Poirot. Langston called it his Symphony of the Spheres, a work inspired by the cosmos itself. He said it would redefine orchestral music, blending mathematics and melody in ways never heard before. He guarded it jealously, allowing only glimpses during rehearsals. Even Fournier saw only fragments." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And who else had access to this score?" "Only those in the music room during rehearsals," Sir Reginald replied. "Fournier, Clara, Edmund, and myself. The servants were not permitted inside, and the other guests arrived only this evening." Poirot's gaze swept the room again, lingering on the 3 suspects. "Very well. I shall speak with each of you in turn, but first I must know your movements this evening. Where were you when the scream was heard?" Fournier spoke first, his voice smooth but tinged with agitation. "I was in the library, reviewing scores for the concert. I heard the scream and ran to the music room with the others. He spread his hands as if to prove his innocence. Clara's response was curt. I was in the guest wing, practicing on my violin. I work alone, always. The scream brought me downstairs. Her tone was defiant, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of her jaw. Edmund hesitated, his fingers twisting a button on his jacket. I was in my room, studying. I came down when I heard the commotion. His eyes flicked to the floor, and Poirot sensed a reluctance, a half-truth. The butler, Perkins, who had been hovering near the door, cleared his throat. "If I may, sir," he said to Poirot, "I saw Maestro Fournier near the music room earlier this evening, before the rehearsal ended. He seemed agitated." Fournier's face darkened. "I was discussing the score with Victor, a professional matter, nothing more." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And you, mademoiselle?" he asked Clara. "Did anyone see you in the guest wing?" A maid, a young woman with a timid air, spoke up. "I saw Miss Vane near the music room, sir, not long before the scream. She was carrying a satchel." Clara's eyes flashed. "I was fetching my violin case. This is absurd." Poirot turned to Edmund. "And you, monsieur? Your room. It is upstairs, oui? Yet your shoes—" He gestured to the young man's boots, which bore faint traces of mud. "They suggest a walk in the garden, perhaps?" Edmund's face reddened. I stepped outside briefly for air. It was nothing." Poirot smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Nothing is nothing, monsieur. Every detail matters." He addressed the room once more. "I shall examine the music room again, and then I shall speak with each of you privately. Until then, remain here." As the guests murmured among themselves, Poirot and Hastings slipped back to the music room. The body had been covered with a sheet awaiting the coroner, but the scene was otherwise untouched. Poirot circled the piano, his eyes darting from the wine glass to the empty desk. He knelt by the ventilation grate, a small iron grid set low in the wall, and ran a finger along its edge. "Curious," he murmured. "This grate, it is not as secure as it seems." Hastings frowned. "Do you think someone tampered with it?" "Perhaps, mon ami. The score is thin, flexible. It could be passed through such an opening, non?" Poirot stood, brushing his hands. "But we must also consider the wine. That smell of almonds. It suggests cyanide, a poison swift and deadly. Who had the opportunity to tamper with the glass?" Hastings rubbed his chin. "Fournier was near the music room, and Clara had that satchel. Edmund's story about the garden doesn't add up either, but why take the score?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, Hastings, is the heart of the matter. The score is not merely music. It is a prize, a legacy, perhaps even a secret, and someone in this house coveted it enough to kill." They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot announced his intention to interview the suspects individually. He began with Fournier, leading him to a small study off the main hall. The conductor sat stiffly, his hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I swear I did not harm Victor. Yes, we argued. He wanted the symphony played at a glacial pace, but I saw its fire, its passion. We disagreed, but that is all." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And the ink on your cuff, maestro? It suggests you handled the score, perhaps more than a glance." Fournier's eyes widened, and he glanced at his sleeve, where a faint smudge of black ink was visible. I may have touched it during our discussion. Victor was careless with his pens." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. "And your visit to London last week? You were seen at a chemist's shop. Cyanide, it is not so difficult to obtain, non? Fournier's face flushed. I bought tonic for my nerves. This is slander. But his voice wavered, and Poirot made a mental note to verify the claim. Next, he spoke with Clara Vane in the conservatory, where the scent of hothouse flowers mingled with the chill evening air. Clara stood by a window, her posture rigid. I know what you think, she said before Poirot could speak, that I hated Victor enough to kill him. Yes, I despised him. He stole my ideas, my motifs, and passed them off as his own. But I am no murderer. Poirot tilted his head. The satchel, mademoiselle. The maid saw you with it near the music room. Large enough to hold a score, perhaps? Clara's lips curled in a faint sneer. My violin case, as I said. You waste your time, Monsieur Poirot. But Poirot's eyes lingered on her hands, which trembled slightly as she adjusted her shawl. We shall see, he said quietly. Finally, he met Edmund Price in the library, where the young man sat hunched over a table, his face pale. Mr. Poirot, he began. I loved Mr. Langston. He was like a father to me. But he could be harsh. He said I wasn't ready to compose on my own. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. And the mud on your shoes, monsieur? You were in the garden, near the music room, perhaps? Edmund's eyes filled with tears. I just needed air. I swear I didn't see anything. But his voice broke, and Poirot sensed a secret lurking beneath the boy's fear. As Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind buzzed with possibilities. Fournier's ambition, Clara's bitterness, Edmund's hidden truth. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The score, he knew, was the key, but its absence was a melody yet to be played. Hastings, he said, his voice low, this is a crime of passion, but also of calculation. We must find the score, and with it, the murderer. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls, as Poirot's little gray cells began to weave the clues into a pattern only he could see. Chapter 3. The Conductor's Baton. The morning after Victor Langston's death dawned gray and oppressive over Ashby Hall, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the mood within. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his pinstriped suit despite the early hour, stood in the library, where the scent of old leather and parchment offered a stark contrast to the grim events of the previous evening. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, sipped a cup of tea, his brow furrowed, as he watched Poirot pace before a towering bookshelf. The detective's small hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to an inner melody only he could hear. Mon ami, Poirot said, pausing to face Hastings. The murder of Victor Langston is a symphony of deception, and the conductor of this crime holds the baton of guilt. I begin with Maestro Julien Fournier, for his passion and his proximity to the music room raise questions the little gray cells cannot ignore. Hastings set down his cup. Fournier? He's a bit of a showman, but a murderer? That ink on his cuff could just be from handling scores. As he said, Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. The cuff, oui, it is a clue, but not the only one. The man's temperament, his ambition, his movements, they form a pattern. We shall see if it is one of innocence or guile. Poirot had arranged to meet Fournier in the morning room, a bright space with tall windows overlooking the frost-kissed gardens. The conductor was already there, standing by a table strewn with sheet music, his long fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. His dark eyes, usually alight with theatrical flair, were shadowed, and his silver-streaked hair was slightly disheveled, a rare lapse in his polished appearance. "Monsieur Poirot," Fournier began, his voice carrying a trace of indignation. "I trust you do not seriously consider me a suspect. I am an artist, not a criminal." Poirot seated himself, gesturing for Fournier to do the same. "Monsieur, in my experience, artists are as capable of passion as any other, and passion can lead to dark deeds. Let us begin with the truth. You argued with Victor Langston yesterday, did you not?" Fournier's hands stilled, and he leaned back, his expression guarded. "Yes, I admitted as much. Victor was stubborn, insisting on a tempo that drained the life from his symphony. I wanted to bring out its fire, its grandeur. We disagreed, as artists do." "Disagreed," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but probing. "Yet the butler, Perkins, saw you near the music room before the rehearsal ended, looking, as he put it, agitated. What was the nature of this agitation?" Fournier's jaw tightened. "I was frustrated, nothing more. Victor refused to let me see the full score, doling out pages like a miser. I went to the music room to press him for more, but he dismissed me. I left him there, alive." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight hesitation in Fournier's words. "And this ink on your cuff," he said, pointing to the smudge, now faintly visible against the white linen. "It suggests you handled more than a few pages. Perhaps the score itself?" Fournier glanced at his sleeve, his lips pursing. "I may have touched his desk during our talk. Victor was careless with his ink. It means nothing." "Everything means something, Maestro," Poirot countered, his tone mild but unyielding. "Tell." "Me? Where were you when the scream was heard? You said the library, oui? Yet no one saw you there." Fournier's fingers resumed their tapping, a nervous staccato. "I was alone, studying scores for the concert. The library is quiet, secluded. I heard the scream and ran to the music room, like the others." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And this trip to London last week, where you visited a chemist's shop, what did you purchase, Monsieur Fournier?" The conductor's face flushed, and he rose, his voice rising with him. "This is outrageous. I bought a tonic for my nerves, as I told you. Conducting is a taxing profession, Monsieur Poirot. You accuse me without proof." Poirot remained unruffled, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Proof, Maestro, is what I seek, and I shall find it, with or without your cooperation. One more question. The score, this symphony of the spheres, what made it so valuable to you?" Fournier hesitated, then sank back into his chair, his defiance waning. "It was extraordinary. Even the fragments I saw were unlike anything I've conducted. To lead its premiere would cement my name among the greats. Victor knew this, and he used it to control me." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the conductor's ambition, his access to the music room, and the ink that tied him to the missing score. "Merci, Monsieur Fournier. You may go, but remain in the house." As Fournier left, his shoulders stiff with resentment, Hastings joined Poirot, his expression skeptical. "He's a fiery one, Poirot, but do you really think he'd kill for a score? And that business about the chemist, nerve tonic, sounds plausible." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gleaming. "Plausible, oui, but convenient. The little gray cells, they whisper of inconsistencies. Fournier's passion for the score is clear, but his story of the library, it lacks corroboration. And the ink, Hastings, it is not the careless smudge of a desk, but the mark of one who has handled papers with intent." They moved to the music room, where the morning light filtered through the heavy drapes, casting long shadows across the piano. The body had been removed, but the scene remained untouched, the wine glass still on the piano, its contents now congealing. Poirot knelt by the ventilation grate he had noticed the previous night, his gloved fingers tracing its edges. The scratches he had observed were clearer in daylight, faint but deliberate, as if someone had pried at the metal. "Hastings," Poirot said, rising. "This grate is the key to the locked room. The score could have been slipped through here, passed to an accomplice outside, or retrieved later. But who had the opportunity?" Hastings frowned, peering at the grate. "It's awfully small, Poirot. A score's pages are thin, but getting them through without damage would take care." "Précisément," Poirot replied. "This was no hasty act. It was planned, executed with precision. We must learn more of Fournier's movements, and of this chemist in London." They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot requested Perkins, the butler, to join them. The dour man stood stiffly, his hands clasped before him. "Perkins," Poirot began, "you saw Maestro Fournier near the music room. At what time, and what was his demeanor?" Perkins cleared his throat, his voice low. "It was perhaps an hour before the scream, sir, around 7 o'clock. The maestro was pacing outside the music-room door, muttering to himself. He looked angry, sir, and when he saw me, he hurried away." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And did you see him enter the music-room?" "No, sir," Perkins replied. "The door was closed, and Mr. Langston was inside, playing the piano. I heard the music stop briefly, then resume." Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler. "So, Fournier was near the music-room, angry, at a time when Langston was alive. The wine, perhaps, was tampered with then, or the score was seen, touched even." Hastings rubbed his chin. "But if Fournier took the score, where is it? We searched his rooms last night and found nothing." Poirot smiled faintly. "The score is close, Hastings. A thief so desperate would not risk taking it far. But we must also consider the others. Clara Vane, with her satchel, and young Edmund, with his muddy shoes. Fournier is but one note in this melody of murder." To test his suspicions, Poirot requested a second meeting with Fournier, this time in the garden, where the conductor stood smoking a cigarette, his breath visible in the cold air. "Monsieur Fournier," Poirot said, approaching, "you did not tell me of your conversation with Langston in the music-room. The butler heard the piano pause, as if you entered. What passed between you?" Fournier's cigarette trembled slightly, and he exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Very well, I went in briefly. I begged Victor to share the full score, to let me prepare properly. He laughed at me, called me a glorified timekeeper. I left in a temper, but he was alive, I swear it." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And the wine glass on the piano, did you see it?" Fournier hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it was there. Victor was sipping from it as we spoke. But I touched nothing, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head, dismissing the conductor. As Fournier walked away, Poirot turned to Hastings. "He admits to being in the room, to seeing the wine. The opportunity was there, Hastings, and the motive, his desire for glory, is strong. Yet something in his fear, it rings true. We must dig deeper." Back in the library, Poirot examined a stack of Fournier's sheet music, left on a table from the previous night. Among the pages, he found a single sheet with a faint pencil mark, a musical notation unlike the others. "Curious," he murmured, holding it to the light. "This is not Fournier's hand, nor Langston's. It is different. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Could it be from the missing score? Perhaps, Poirot said, slipping the sheet into his pocket. It is a clue, Hastings, a single note in the symphony of truth. Fournier is not yet cleared, but neither is he condemned. We move to the next player in this drama, and the little gray cells, they will continue to listen. The wind howled outside, carrying with it the promise of revelations yet to come, as Poirot's mind orchestrated the clues into a pattern only he could discern. Chapter 4. The Rival's Shadow. The afternoon light filtered through the conservatory's tall glass panes, casting dappled shadows across the tiled floor where Hercule Poirot stood, his polished shoes reflecting the faint gleam of the sun. The air was heavy with the scent of orchids and damp earth, a humid contrast to the chill that lingered in the rest of Ashby Hall. Captain Hastings lingered near a potted fern, his expression a mix of curiosity and unease, as Poirot prepared to interview Clara Vane, the rival composer whose sharp words and sharper gaze had already marked her as a figure of interest in the murder of Victor Langston. Poirot's small frame was erect, his hands clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, as he regarded the woman before him. Clara Vane stood by a wrought-iron bench, her auburn hair catching the light like a flame, though her green eyes were cold, almost defiant. She wore a high-necked dress of dark silk, its severity underscoring her austere demeanor. The satchel, which the maid had mentioned seeing near the music-room, rested at her feet, its leather worn but meticulously maintained. "Mademoiselle Vane," Poirot began, his voice smooth yet edged with purpose, "you have admitted to a disaffection for Victor Langston. You called him a thief of ideas, a man who overshadowed your own talent. Such feelings, they can lead to actions most regrettable. Non?" Clara's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "You waste no time, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I despised Victor. He had a gift for taking what was not his, motifs, harmonies, even the admiration of patrons like Sir Reginald. But to kill him, that would be to stoop to his level, and I am above such pettiness." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the defiance in her tone. Above pettiness, perhaps, but not above ambition. The missing score, this symphony of the spheres, it was a work that threatened to eclipse you further, was it not? A motive, mademoiselle, for a desperate act. Clara's fingers tightened on the bench's edge, but her voice remained steady. "If I wanted to ruin Victor, I'd have outdone him with my own music. I didn't need to steal his score or poison his wine. Besides, I was in the guest wing, practicing my violin, when that scream rang out. Ask anyone." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze drifting to the satchel. "Yet the maid, she saw you near the music-room, carrying this very bag. A satchel, mademoiselle, large enough to conceal a manuscript. What was its purpose?" Clara's eyes flicked to the satchel, then back to Poirot. "My violin case, as I told you. I fetched it from my room before the rehearsal. The maid is mistaken, or lying." Poirot stepped closer, his movements deliberate, like a cat circling its prey. "The maid? She is a simple girl, with no reason to invent such a detail. And this satchel, it is heavy, non? May I see its contents?" Clara hesitated, her jaw tightening, but she unlatched the satchel and opened it, revealing a jumble of sheet music, a tuning fork, and a small notebook. "See for yourself, Monsieur Poirot. Nothing but my work." Poirot's gloved hands sifted through the contents with care, his fingers pausing on the notebook. He opened it, revealing pages of musical notations, but nothing resembling Langston's grand score. Yet the weight of the satchel intrigued him. It seemed heavier than its contents justified. He tapped the leather, his eyes narrowing. "Curious," he murmured, "but we shall return to this, mademoiselle." He straightened, fixing Clara with a piercing stare. "Tell me, what did you know of Langston's score? Had you seen it, perhaps, during a rehearsal?" Clara's expression hardened. "I saw fragments, nothing more. Victor was secretive, clutching his precious pages like a miser. What I saw was brilliant, I'll admit, but it bore traces of my own work, ideas he'd overheard in our shared circles and claimed as his own." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And this made you angry?" "Oui?" "Angry enough to confront him, perhaps in the music room, before his death." Clara's laugh was sharp, like the snap of a violin string. "Confront him? I avoided him whenever possible. I was nowhere near the music room when he died. You're chasing shadows, Monsieur Poirot." But Poirot was not so easily dismissed. He stepped back, gesturing to Hastings, who had been listening intently. "Mon ami, fetch the maid, if you please. I wish to hear her account directly." Hastings nodded and left, returning moments later with the maid, a young woman named Elsie, whose round face was pale with nerves. She curtsied awkwardly, her hands twisting in her apron. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling, "I only told what I saw." Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "And what did you see, mademoiselle?" "Be precise, if you please." Elsie swallowed, glancing at Clara, who stood rigid, her eyes like daggers. "I was dusting in the hall near the music room, sir, about half an hour before the scream. I saw Miss Vane coming from that direction, carrying her satchel. She looked hurried, like she didn't want to be seen." Clara's voice cut in, sharp and cold. "I was fetching my violin case, as I said. The music room is near the stairs to the guest wing. You've muddled the timing, girl." Elsie flinched but held her ground. "No, miss. I'm sure. It was before the rehearsal ended, because I heard Mr. Langston playing the piano." Poirot raised a hand, silencing Clara's protest. "Merci, Elsie. You may go." As the maid scurried away, Poirot turned back to Clara, his expression unreadable. "A discrepancy, mademoiselle. You claim to have been in the guest wing, yet you were seen near the music room at a time when Langston was alive. Explain, if you please." Clara's composure wavered, her fingers brushing her hair in a rare gesture of unease. "The girl is confused. I may have passed the music room on my way to the guest wing. It's a large house, Monsieur Poirot. Corridors connect many paths." Poirot nodded, but his eyes betrayed his skepticism. "Very well. Let us speak of another matter. The wine glass, the one found beside Langston's body. Did you see it during the rehearsal?" Clara frowned, as if the question caught her off guard. Yes, it was there. Victor often drank while working. It was no secret." "And you, mademoiselle, did you have access to the wine? It came from Sir Reginald's cellar, did it not?" Her eyes narrowed. "The cellar is open to all guests, but I had no reason to tamper with his wine. You're grasping at straws." Poirot smiled faintly, undeterred. "The little gray cells, they grasp at truths, not straws. One final question. Your violin practice. It was alone, you say? No one heard you?" Clara's lips tightened. "I prefer solitude when I work. The guest wing is quiet. If you doubt me, search my room. You'll find nothing." Poirot inclined his head, dismissing her. As Clara left, her satchel clutched tightly, Hastings approached, his brow furrowed. "She's a cool one, Poirot. That story about the violin case doesn't quite add up, and that satchel, did you notice how she guarded it? Oui, Hastings, Poirot replied, his voice low. The satchel is a puzzle, and her presence near the music room is no coincidence. She speaks of solitude, but her eyes betray calculation. We must examine her room and this satchel more closely. They made their way to the guest wing, where Clara's room was a study in order. A neatly made bed, a violin case on a table, and a small writing desk with more sheet music. Poirot's attention was drawn to the satchel, which Clara had left behind. He opened it again, this time examining the lining. His fingers probed the base, detecting a slight unevenness. With a deft movement, he peeled back a flap of leather, revealing a hidden compartment, empty, but large enough to hold a folded manuscript. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice tinged with excitement. This is no ordinary satchel. It was designed to conceal, to smuggle. But the score is not here. She has moved it, perhaps, or never had it at all. Hastings scratched his head. If she took the score, why stay in the house? She could have slipped away last night. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because, mon ami, she is clever. To flee would be to admit guilt. No, she remains, playing the part of the innocent rival. But the maid's testimony, the hidden compartment, these are threads in the tapestry of her deceit. They left the room, Poirot's mind racing. He paused in the corridor, his gaze distant. We must also consider the wine. Hastings. The poison, it was in the glass, but how was it delivered? Clara had access to the cellar, as did Fournier and young Edmund. Yet her bitterness, her proximity to the music room, it makes her a shadow we cannot ignore. As they descended to the drawing room, where the other guests awaited, Poirot's thoughts turned to the missing score. The Symphony of the Spheres, he murmured. It is more than music. It is a motive, a prize. And Clara Vane, she casts a long shadow over this crime. The conservatory's flowers seemed to wilt under the weight of suspicion, as Poirot prepared to unravel the next thread in the intricate melody of murder. Chapter 5. The Student's Burden. The late afternoon sun cast long golden rays across the polished floors of Ashby Hall, but its warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung over the house. Hercule Poirot, his small frame as precise as ever in a tailored suit, stood in the library, his sharp eyes fixed on a portrait of a stern-faced ancestor, glowering from the wall. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, hovered nearby, his hands fidgeting as he tried to make sense of the tangled web of clues surrounding Victor Langston's murder. The missing score, the poisoned wine, the locked music room, all pointed to a calculated crime, and now Poirot's attention turned to the youngest suspect, Edmund Price, the composer's student, whose nervous demeanor and muddy shoes hinted at secrets yet to be uncovered. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings with a thoughtful tilt of his head. The young Edmund, he is a puzzle within a puzzle. His devotion to Langston is clear, yet there is a weight upon him, a burden, perhaps, of loyalty or guilt. We must probe this delicate soul with care, for the truth often hides in the silences of the young. Hastings nodded, though his brow furrowed. He's just a lad, Poirot, devastated by his mentor's death, by the look of him. Those muddy shoes could mean anything, a walk to clear his head, like he said. Poirot's mustache quivered with a faint smile. A walk, oui, but where and why? The little gray cells, they do not accept coincidence so easily. Come, We shall speak with Monsieur Price in the study, where he cannot hide behind the chaos of the drawing room. The study was a small, book-lined room, its air thick with the scent of aged paper and wax polish. Edmund Price sat at a mahogany desk, his sandy hair disheveled, his blue eyes wide and restless. His hands twisted a pencil, its tip worn to a blunt stub, and his shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible load. Poirot took a seat opposite, his posture impeccable, while Hastings stood by the door, observing with his usual mix of curiosity and concern. "Monsieur Price," Poirot began, his voice gentle yet probing, like a violinist testing a delicate string, "you have lost a mentor, a man you called a father. Yet I sense in you a turmoil, a conflict that goes beyond grief. Tell me, what was your relationship with Victor Langston truly like?" Edmund's fingers tightened on the pencil, and he swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "He was everything to me, Mr. Poirot. He saw something in my music when no one else did. He took me on as his student, taught me structure, harmony, how to make notes sing. But he was strict, sometimes cruel. He'd tear apart my compositions, call them childish, say I wasn't ready to stand on my own." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the tremor in the young man's voice. "Cruel, you say? And this made you resent him, perhaps?" Edmund's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with sudden fire. "No, I didn't resent him. I wanted to please him, to prove myself. He promised me, you know. He said I'd be named as co-composer on the Symphony of the Spheres. That score. It was his masterpiece, but he let me help with parts of it, small motifs. It was the greatest honor of my life." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "And this score, you saw it on his desk that morning, oui? You said it was extraordinary. Tell me, what made it so?" Edmund's face lit up, a spark of passion breaking through his nerves. "It was like nothing I'd ever seen, Mr. Poirot. The way he wove mathematics into music, patterns, ratios, like the orbits of planets. It was complex, almost otherworldly, but so beautiful. I saw it on his desk during our lesson, pages covered in his tight, precise script. I wanted to study it, to learn from it, but he kept it locked away most of the time." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quickening thoughts. "Locked away, yet it is gone now, stolen from a locked room. Tell me, Monsieur Price, where were you when the scream was heard? You said you were studying in your room, but your shoes, they tell a different story." Edmund's face paled, and the pencil snapped in his hands, the sound sharp in the quiet room. I told you, I stepped outside for air. The house felt stifling, and I needed to think. I walked in the garden, near the rose beds, but I didn't go near the music room. I swear it." Poirot's eyes drifted to Edmund's boots, still bearing faint traces of dark, loamy soil. "The garden, oui, but the rose beds are on the east side of the house, while the music room faces west, near the herb garden. Your shoes, they carry the earth of that area, non? How do you explain this?" Edmund's hands trembled, and he looked away, his voice barely a whisper. I may have wandered farther than I meant. I was upset, thinking about Mr. Langston's critiques. I didn't realize where I was walking." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The detective leaned back, his fingers steepled. "And during this wander, did you see anything unusual? Anyone near the music room, perhaps?" Edmund hesitated, his eyes flickering with something. Fear, perhaps, or indecision. "No, I saw no one. Just the house, the windows lit up. I went back inside when I heard the scream." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "You are young, Monsieur Price, and the young often carry burdens they do not wish to name. If you know something, if you saw something, you must tell Hercule Poirot. The truth, it is the only path to justice." Edmund's eyes filled with tears, and he shook his head violently. "I don't know anything. I didn't hurt him, I swear. He was my teacher, my everything." His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. Poirot rose, his expression unreadable, and gestured for Hastings to follow him to the window. "He is sincere in his grief," Poirot murmured, "but he hides something, Hastings. The mud, the hesitation. It suggests he was near the music room, perhaps at the moment of the crime. But is he the murderer, or a witness to another's act?" Hastings frowned, glancing back at Edmund, who was wiping his eyes. "He's just a boy, Poirot. Could he really poison Langston and steal the score? It seems too cold-blooded." "Cold-blooded, non," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But desperate, perhaps. The young, they feel deeply, and their loyalties can blind them. We must learn more of his movements, and of this promise to be co-composer. It is a motive, Hastings, if Langston betrayed that promise." Leaving Edmund to compose himself, Poirot led Hastings to the garden, where the herb beds lay just outside the music room's windows. The ground was soft from recent rain, and Poirot knelt, his gloved hands sifting through the soil. He found faint impressions, boot prints, small and narrow, matching Edmund's shoes. Nearby, the ventilation grate he had examined before showed its telltale scratches, gleaming faintly in the fading light. "See, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the prints. "They lead from the herb garden to the grate. Our young friend was here, close to the scene of the crime. But for what purpose? To steal? To spy? Or merely to linger?" Hastings scratched his head. "If he took the score through the grate, where is it? His room was searched like the others. Nothing was found." Poirot stood, brushing his gloves. "The score is hidden, mon ami, but not far. Edmund's fear suggests he knows more than he says. Perhaps he saw the thief, or even helped them, out of loyalty or coercion. We must press him, but gently, lest we break the fragile thread of his trust." Returning to the house, Poirot requested a private moment with Sir Reginald in the drawing-room. The patron, his face still drawn with shock, sat heavily in an armchair. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "this tragedy grows darker by the hour. Have you found anything?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I find threads, Sir Reginald, and they weave a pattern. Tell me, what was Edmund Price's role in the Symphony of the Spheres? He claims Langston promised him credit as co-composer. Is this true?" Sir Reginald frowned, rubbing his whiskers. "Victor mentioned it once, in passing. He said Edmund had contributed a few ideas, motifs for the second movement. But co-composer? That seems generous for Victor, who guarded his work jealously. I thought it more a kindness to encourage the boy." Poirot's mustache quivered. A kindness or a manipulation? If Langston dangled this promise, then withdrew it, it could drive a young man to desperation. "Merci, Sir Reginald. Your words are most illuminating." As they left the drawing-room, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Edmund's burden is twofold, his devotion to Langston and his ambition to rise. The muddy shoes, the promise of the score, they point to a boy caught in a storm of emotions. But is he the tempest, or merely swept along by it? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting Ashby Hall in twilight, as Poirot's little gray cells continued to unravel the melody of murder, note by cautious note. Chapter 6. The Poisoned Chalice. The evening shadows lengthened across Ashby Hall, draping the grand staircase in a somber twilight as Hercule Poirot descended, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished wood. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and the faint, lingering tension of a house in mourning. Captain Hastings followed, his face a study in concern, his mind grappling with the mounting clues in Victor Langston's murder. The locked music room, the missing score, the suspicious movements of Fournier, Clara, and Edmond, all swirled in Poirot's thoughts. But now a new piece of the puzzle had emerged. The coroner's report, delivered that afternoon, confirming cyanide as the cause of Langston's death. In the drawing room, Poirot stood before the assembled household, his small frame commanding attention despite the grandeur of the surroundings. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light on the faces of Sir Reginald Ashby, Maestro Fournier, Clara Vane, Edmund Price, and the servants, who stood stiffly at the edges of the room. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned each expression, noting the flicker of fear in Fournier's gaze, the defiant tilt of Clara's chin, and the nervous twitching of Edmund's hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "we have a development most grave. The coroner confirms that Victor Langston died of cyanide poisoning, administered through the wine found beside his body. This was no accident, but a murder most deliberate. The poison, it was in the glass, and only in the glass of Monsieur Langston. This tells us the killer acted with precision, with knowledge of their victim's habits." A gasp rippled through the room, and Sir Reginald's hand trembled as he clutched his handkerchief. "Cyanide!" he exclaimed. "Good heavens, Poirot, who could do such a thing, and in my house?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "That, Sir Reginald, is what I intend to discover. The wine, it came from your cellar, oui? Who had access to it?" Sir Reginald nodded, his whiskers quivering. "The cellar is open to all guests. The wine was brought up for the rehearsal, a fine Bordeaux. Several bottles were opened, and glasses were set out in the music room for Victor and the musicians. Anyone could have tampered with his glass." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quickening thoughts. "Anyone, oui, but not everyone. The killer knew which glass was Langston's, and they had the opportunity to add the poison. We must retrace the movements of the wine and of those who were near it." He turned to Perkins, the butler, who stood rigidly by the door. "Monsieur Perkins, you oversaw the serving of the wine. Tell me, who handled the glasses before they reached the music room?" Perkins cleared his throat, his dour face paling slightly. "I poured the wine myself, sir, from the bottles in the cellar. I brought a tray to the music room around 6 o'clock before the rehearsal began. Mr. Langston took a glass, as did Maestro Fournier and Miss Vane. Mr. Price declined, saying he preferred water." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And where was this tray left during the rehearsal?" "In the music room, sir, on a side table near the piano," Perkins replied. "I left it there and returned to my duties. The room was locked when Mr. Langston began his work, but the musicians came and went during breaks." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. "So, the glass was accessible, but only to those who entered the music room. Merci, Perkins." He turned to the three suspects, his gaze piercing. "Maestro Fournier, Mademoiselle Vane, Monsieur Price, you were all in the music room at some point. Did you see anyone approach the tray, perhaps touch the glass? Fournier shook his head, his hands gesturing dramatically. I was focused on the music, Monsieur Poirot. I took my glass and drank, but I noticed nothing unusual about Victor's. Clara's voice was sharp, cutting through the room. I barely touched the wine. My focus was on my violin, not on Victor's habits. If someone poisoned his glass, it wasn't me. Edmond, his face flushed, stammered. I didn't even take a glass. I was at the back of the room, taking notes on Mr. Langston's instructions. I didn't see anything. Poirot's eyes lingered on Edmond, noting the boy's quickened breathing. Yet you were near the piano, Monsieur Price, close enough to observe. The little gray cells. They wonder if you saw more than you admit. Edmond's hands clenched, but he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the floor. Poirot turned back to the group, his voice calm but insistent. The poison, it required opportunity and intent. Cyanide is not a substance one carries lightly. It must be procured, concealed, delivered. We shall investigate this further. Leaving the drawing room, Poirot led Hastings to the music room, where the scene remained as it had been, save for the absence of Langston's body. The wineglass, now sealed in a police bag for evidence, sat on a table, its contents a dark, accusing stain. Poirot circled the piano, his gloved hands hovering over the keys as if playing an invisible melody. "The glass, Hastings," he said. "It was placed here, within reach of Langston alone. The killer knew he would drink, and they ensured the poison reached only him." Hastings frowned, peering at the side table where the tray had been. But how? The tray was out in the open during the rehearsal. Anyone could have slipped something into the glass, but they'd need to be quick and unnoticed. "Précisément," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. This was no impulsive act. The killer watched, waited, chose their moment. Let us consider the timeline. The wine was poured at 6, the rehearsal began at 6:30, and the scream was heard just after 8. In that time, the music room was locked, but breaks were taken, oui? Hastings nodded. Perkins said the musicians left for a few minutes around 7 to stretch their legs. Langston stayed at the piano, working alone. Poirot's gaze drifted to the ventilation grate, its scratches still visible in the dim light. And during this break, the room was empty, save for Langston. The grate, it remains a possibility for the score's removal, but the poison, it was in the glass before the scream. We must learn who was near the tray and when. To test this, Poirot summoned Elsie, the maid who had seen Clara near the music room. She entered, her apron twisted in her nervous hands, and curtsied awkwardly. "Mademoiselle Elsie," Poirot said, his tone gentle. "You saw Miss Vane with her satchel, but tell me, did you see anyone else near the music room during the rehearsal break?" Elsie hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. I saw Maestro Fournier, sir, coming out of the music room around 7. He looked angry, like he'd been arguing. And Mr. Price, he was in the hall a bit later, pacing near the door." Poirot's mustache quivered. "And the tray of wine glasses, did you see anyone touch it?" Elsie shook her head. "No, sir. I was dusting in the hall, not inside. But I noticed Mr. Langston's glass was always on the piano, separate from the others. He kept it close, like he didn't trust anyone." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, his mind racing. "The glass on the piano," he murmured to Hastings. "It was a deliberate choice. The killer knew Langston's habit, knew he would drink from it. This points to someone close to him, someone who observed his ways. Hastings rubbed his chin. Fournier was in the room, arguing with Langston. Clara was seen nearby, and Edmund was pacing outside. Any of them could have slipped the poison in during the break. But we must also consider the source of the cyanide, Poirot said. It is not a common household item. Fournier's visit to the London chemist, Clara's access to chemicals for her so-called jewelry cleaning, and Edmund, perhaps he had access through his studies. We must verify these threads. Poirot requested Sir Reginald's permission to examine the cellar where the wine had originated. The cavernous space was lined with racks of dusty bottles, their labels gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Poirot inspected the Bordeaux bottles, noting their corks were intact, with no signs of tampering. The poison was not in the bottle, he said, but in the glass, after it was poured. This narrows our window of opportunity. Back in the library, Poirot pored over a list of the household's movements, compiled by Perkins at his request. The timeline revealed gaps. Fournier's argument with Langston at 7, Clara's presence near the music room, Edmund's pacing in the hall. Each had been close to the scene, each with a motive tied to the score: ambition, jealousy, or betrayal. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. The poisoned chalice is a symbol of treachery, but also of precision. The killer did not strike at random. They chose their moment, their method, their victim. The score, it is the key, but the poison, it is the hand that played the fatal note. As night fell over Ashby Hall, Poirot's little gray cells hummed with the rhythm of suspicion, each clue a note in the dark symphony of murder, waiting to be resolved. Chapter 7. The Hidden Note. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Ashby Hall, veiling the manicured lawns in a ghostly shroud as Hercule Poirot stepped into the music room once more. The air was cool, carrying the faint echo of last night's tragedy, and the grand piano stood silent, its polished surface reflecting the dim light filtering through the heavy drapes. Captain Hastings followed, his face etched with the strain of a sleepless night, his mind wrestling with the complexities of Victor Langston's murder. The coroner's confirmation of cyanide, the missing score, the suspicious movements of the suspects, all formed a discordant melody that Poirot was determined to resolve. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low as he surveyed the room. "We have examined the players, Fournier with his ambition, Clara with her jealousy, Edmund with his burden. But the stage itself, this music room, it holds secrets yet to be uncovered. The little gray cells, they demand we look again, for the truth is often hidden in the smallest details." Hastings rubbed his eyes, stifling a yawn. "We've searched this place top to bottom, Poirot. The score's gone, the glass is with the police, and the room was locked. What more can we find?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. A crime is like a composition. Every note, every pause, has purpose. We must listen for the note that is out of place." He began a meticulous inspection, his gloved hands moving with the precision of a conductor. The piano, the side table, the music stand, all were as they had been, save for the absence of Langston's body and the wine glass. Poirot's eyes settled on the ventilation grate, its faint scratches gleaming like a subtle discord in the room's harmony. He knelt, his fingers tracing the metal, noting the slight looseness of the screws. "This grate," he murmured, "it is the silent partner in this crime. The score, it could have passed through here, slipped to an accomplice, or hidden nearby." Hastings crouched beside him, peering at the grate. It's possible, but it'd be a tight fit. The score's pages would need to be folded carefully to avoid damage. Whoever did it had steady hands. Précisément, Poirot replied, rising. And steady hands suggest a mind that plans, not one that acts in haste. Let us see what lies beyond. He led Hastings outside to the herb garden, where the grate's exterior was set low in the stone wall. The earth beneath was soft and disturbed by recent rain, and Poirot's sharp eyes caught a faint irregularity, a patch of soil slightly more compact than the rest, as if trodden or tamped down. He knelt again, his gloves protecting his hands as he probed the ground. "Here, Hastings," he said, "something has been disturbed. Not buried deeply, perhaps, but enough to conceal." Using a small trowel from the garden shed, Poirot dug carefully, but found only loose soil and a few pebbles. "Nothing," he said, frowning, "but the earth tells a story. Someone stood here, perhaps to retrieve the score, or to ensure it was not found." Hastings scratched his head. If the score was taken through the grate, why not keep it? Why hide it out here and risk discovery? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, mon ami, the thief is still among us. To carry the score away would invite suspicion, but to hide it close, it buys time, allows them to play the innocent while planning their next move." Returning to the music room, Poirot's attention shifted to the desk where Langston had worked. Its surface was bare, save for a few pencils and an empty ink bottle. But Poirot's fingers explored its edges, seeking hidden compartments. He pressed a panel beneath the drawer, and a faint click revealed a shallow recess. Empty, but lined with velvet, as if designed to hold something precious. "A hiding place," Poirot said, "but not for the score. Perhaps for notes, sketches, something Langston wished to protect." Hastings leaned closer. "Sketches for the symphony, maybe? If they were stolen too, it could explain why the score's so valuable." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Oui, or perhaps a secret within the score itself. A code, a dedication, something that drove the killer to act. We must search the house, Hastings, for the score is here, I am certain." With Sir Reginald's permission, Poirot organized a thorough search, directing the servants to check every room, cupboard, and crevice. He and Hastings focused on the suspect's quarters, beginning with Clara Vane's room in the guest wing. The satchel, with its hidden compartment, was still there, but a closer inspection revealed nothing new. However, on Clara's writing desk, Poirot found a single sheet of music, tucked beneath a pile of her own compositions. The notation was in Langston's precise hand, a fragment of melody unlike Clara's angular modernist style. "This," Poirot said, holding the sheet to the light, "is not hers. It is a piece of Langston's work, perhaps a discarded draft. Why does she have it?" Hastings frowned. Could she have taken it from the music room before the murder? To study it, or to steal his ideas like she accused him of doing? "Perhaps," Poirot replied, slipping the sheet into his pocket. "But it is not the full score. It is a clue, a hidden note in the symphony of this crime. We must see what else the house reveals." The search of Fournier's room yielded little, a collection of batons, a few annotated scores, and a bottle of nerve tonic, which Poirot noted with interest, but set aside for later inquiry. Edmund's room, however, offered a surprise. Tucked inside a book of music theory, Poirot found a crumpled letter written in Langston's hand. It was brief, addressed to Edmund. "Your motifs show promise, but they lack depth. Revise them, and we shall discuss your role in the symphony." The tone was curt, almost dismissive, and Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read it. "This letter," he said to Hastings, "it confirms Edmund's claim of contributing to the score, but it also suggests Langston was not ready to grant him credit. A motive, perhaps, for a young man desperate to prove himself." Hastings shook his head. But Edmund's devotion to Langston, it seemed genuine. Could he really turn on his mentor like that? Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind weaving the clues together. Devotion, Hastings, can curdle into betrayal when promises are broken. This letter, it is a wound to a young man's pride. Yet the score's absence, it points to a thief with a different purpose, one who coveted its brilliance, not its credit. As the search concluded without finding the full score, Poirot returned to the library, where he spread the single sheet from Clara's room and the letter from Edmund's across a table. He studied them, his fingers tracing the notes on the fragment, comparing them to the faint pencil mark he had found in Fournier's scores. "These are pieces of the puzzle," he said, "but they are not the whole. The score, it is hidden in a place both clever and close, a place where none would think to look." Hastings rubbed his chin. "What about the grate? You said it could have been passed through, but we found nothing outside." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "The grate is a distraction, perhaps, or a means of retrieval later. The score is within these walls. Hastings, perhaps disguised as something else, a book, a bundle of papers. We must think like the thief, who is cunning but not infallible." He summoned Perkins, the butler, and inquired about the household's routines. "Tell me, Monsieur Perkins, are there places in the house where papers might be hidden? Unused rooms, storage areas, perhaps a safe?" Perkins frowned, his dour face creasing. "There's the attic, sir, full of old trunks and sheet music from Sir Reginald's past concerts. And the study has a safe, but only Sir Reginald has the key." Poirot's mustache quivered. "The attic, oui, a place of forgotten things, yet accessible to all. We shall look there, but first I must speak with Clara Vane again. This fragment of Langston's work in her possession, it is a note that does not belong in her melody." As they prepared to confront Clara, Poirot's thoughts turned to the poison, the score, and the locked room. "The hidden note, Hastings," he murmured. "It is not just on paper, but in the hearts of those who coveted Langston's genius. We are close, mon ami, to hearing the true melody of this crime." The mist outside thickened, cloaking Ashby Hall in secrecy, as Poirot's little gray cells continued their relentless pursuit of the truth. Chapter 8. The Maestro's Mask. The second evening at Ashby Hall descended with a palpable weight, the grandeur of its chandeliers dimmed by the shadow of Victor Langston's murder. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a beacon of precision amidst the gathering gloom, stood in the library, his sharp eyes fixed on the single sheet of music he had found in Clara Vane's room and the crumpled letter from Edmund Price's book. The faint pencil mark from Fournier's scores lay beside them, a trio of clues that whispered of secrets yet to be unveiled. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, paced near the fireplace, his brow creased with the effort of keeping pace with Poirot's relentless deductions. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a measured cadence, "we have heard the notes of ambition, jealousy, and betrayal, but the conductor of this crime, he wears a mask. Maestro Fournier, with his flair and his fury, he is a man of passion, but is it the passion of a killer? We must peel back this mask to see the truth. Hastings paused, his hands clasped behind him. Fournier's a volatile sort, Poirot, but he seemed genuinely shocked by Langston's death. That ink smudge, though, it ties him to the score. And his story about the London chemist doesn't sit right. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quickening thoughts. The ink is a thread, and the chemist, a shadow. We shall confront the maestro again, but this time we shall press harder, for the little gray cells sense a dissonance in his melody. Poirot arranged to meet Fournier in the morning room, where the conductor stood by a window, his tall frame silhouetted against the fading light. His silver-streaked hair was combed with care, but his dark eyes betrayed a restlessness, and his fingers toyed with a conductor's baton, twirling it with practiced ease. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of Fournier's cologne, a sharp contrast to the grim purpose of the interview. "Monsieur Fournier," Poirot began, seating himself with deliberate calm, "you have been less than forthcoming. You admitted to arguing with Victor Langston, to handling his score, to being in the music room. Yet you claim innocence. The little gray cells, they are not convinced. Tell me, what did you truly seek from Langston's score?" Fournier's baton stilled, and he turned, his expression a mix of indignation and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot, I have told you all. Victor was a genius, but a tyrant. He withheld the full score, teasing me with fragments, knowing I needed it to prepare for the premiere. I wanted only to do justice to his work, to make it soar under my baton." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faint tremor in Fournier's voice. "To soar, oui, and to elevate your own name. The symphony of the spheres was to be your triumph, was it not? A triumph worth any price, perhaps even murder?" Fournier's face flushed, and he slammed the baton on the table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "How dare you? I am no murderer. Yes, I wanted the premiere, but I would not kill for it. Victor was alive when I left him, I swear it." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but unyielding. "And the ink on your cuff, maestro? You said it was from Langston's desk, yet it matches the ink of his score, not the common ink of this house. You handled the manuscript, perhaps more than you admit." Fournier's eyes widened, and he glanced at his sleeve, where the smudge had faded but remained visible. I touched the score during our argument, yes. I begged to see it, to study it. Victor pushed it away, spilling ink. It was an accident, nothing more." Poirot's mustache quivered. "An accident? Or an opportunity? You were in the music room at 7 during the rehearsal break when the wine glass was accessible. Did you see it? Perhaps touch it?" Fournier's hands clenched and he leaned back, his voice dropping. "I saw the glass. Yes. Victor was sipping from it as always. I touched nothing, Monsieur Poirot. You have no proof." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Proof, maestro, is what I seek. Let us speak of London, your visit to the chemist. You claim it was for nerve tonic, yet cyanide is a substance not so difficult to obtain for a man of means. What did you purchase, truly?" Fournier's face darkened, and he rose, pacing to the window. "I told you, a tonic. I have conducted for years, under pressure you cannot imagine. My nerves, they betray me sometimes. The chemist gave me a harmless remedy, nothing more. Check the records if you doubt me." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "I shall, Monsieur Fournier. And one final question. This sheet of music, found among your scores, He produced the page with the faint pencil mark, its notation distinct from Fournier's own. "It is not yours nor Langston's. Whose is it, and why was it in your possession?" Fournier's eyes flickered with surprise, then narrowed. I don't know. It must have been mixed with my papers. Perhaps it's one of Victor's drafts, left behind after a rehearsal. I swear I've never seen it before." Poirot slipped the sheet back into his pocket, his voice calm but pointed. "Very well, maestro. You may go, but know this. The mask you wear, it slips. The truth, it will not remain hidden." As Fournier left, his baton clutched tightly. Hastings approached, his brow furrowed. "He's rattled, Poirot, but he sticks to his story. That sheet of music, though, could it be part of the score?" Poirot shook his head. "No, it is not the Symphony of the Spheres. It is something else, a composition unfamiliar, yet it connects to this crime." Fournier's reaction, it was genuine surprise, but also fear. He knows more than he says, but is it of the murder or something else? They moved to the drawing room, where Poirot requested Sir Reginald's assistance in contacting the London chemist. "We must verify Fournier's purchase," Poirot said. "If it was indeed a tonic, we eliminate one thread. If not, we tighten the noose." While awaiting the response, Poirot returned to the music room, his mind drawn back to the ventilation grate. He examined it again, noting the scratches were deeper on the exterior, suggesting force from outside. "The score," he murmured to Hastings. "It was removed this way, I am certain. But by whom, and when?" Fournier was inside, arguing with Langston. Could he have passed it through, or was another at work? Hastings frowned, peering at the grate. If Fournier took it, why not keep it? He'd need it for the premiere, wouldn't he? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, mon ami, the score was not his goal, but a means to an end. Or perhaps he is not the thief, but a witness, afraid to speak. His mask, it hides either guilt or knowledge." To test this, Poirot examined Fournier's belongings again, with Sir Reginald's permission. In the conductor's room, hidden beneath a pile of sheet music, Poirot found a small notebook, its pages filled with jotted timings and annotations for the symphony's premiere. One entry caught his eye. "VL, refuses full score. Must persuade or find another way." The words were underlined, the ink fresh. "This," Poirot said, showing it to Hastings, "is not proof of murder, but of desperation. Fournier wanted the score, perhaps enough to steal, but to kill. The little gray cells, they are not yet certain." As they left the room, a telegram arrived from the London chemist, confirming Fournier's purchase of a nerve tonic. Harmless, as he claimed. Poirot's brow furrowed. So, the cyanide did not come from him, or he was clever enough to cover his tracks. We must look to Clara and Edmund, for the poison's source remains a mystery. Hastings rubbed his chin. Fournier's ambitious, but he seems too theatrical to be a cold-blooded killer. Clara, though, she's got that calculating streak. Poirot nodded, his mind weaving the clues together. "The maestro's mask is slipping, Hastings, but it has not fallen. His ambition, his presence in the music room, the ink, they point to involvement, but not yet to guilt. We must turn our attention to the others, for the hidden note of this crime is still out of reach." The evening deepened, the chandeliers casting a soft glow over Ashby Hall, as Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth continued to unravel the intricate score of murder. Chapter 9. The Garden's Secret. The third morning at Ashby Hall broke with a pale sun struggling through the mist, casting a ghostly light over the gardens where Hercule Poirot now stood, his polished shoes carefully navigating the damp earth. The herb garden, nestled against the west wall of the music room, was a patchwork of rosemary and thyme, its scents mingling with the chill air. Captain Hastings, bundled in a tweed coat, followed closely, his breath visible as he peered at the ground, trying to discern what held Poirot's unwavering attention. The detective's small frame was bent slightly, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his gray eyes fixed on the faint boot prints near the ventilation grate, prints that matched young Edmund Price's shoes. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. "The garden, it is a silent witness to our crime. These prints, they place Edmund near the music room at a critical moment. But was he the thief, the murderer, or merely a boy caught in the wrong place? The little gray cells, they demand answers." Hastings crouched, examining the prints. "They're clear enough, Poirot, and they lead right to the grate. But we dug there yesterday and found nothing. If Edmund took the score, where is it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his restless mind. "The score. It is close, Hastings. The thief did not flee with it, for to do so would draw suspicion. No, it is hidden, perhaps in this very garden, or within the walls of Ashby Hall. We must follow these prints and see where they lead." The prints, faint but distinct in the loamy soil, trailed from the grate toward a low stone wall separating the herb garden from a cluster of rose beds. Poirot followed them, his eyes scanning the ground for further signs of disturbance. Near the wall, he paused, noting a patch of earth that appeared freshly turned, its surface smoother than the surrounding soil. He knelt, his gloves brushing aside leaves to reveal a small, compacted area, as if something had been pressed into the ground and then removed. "Here," Poirot said, his voice tinged with excitement. Something was hidden, perhaps briefly. The score, it could have been buried here, then retrieved when the search began. Hastings frowned, his hands on his hips. But why bury it and then dig it up? Why not keep it hidden in a room, like Clara's satchel or Fournier's music case? Poirot rose, brushing his gloves. "Because, mon ami, the thief is clever. A room can be searched, a satchel inspected, but the garden, it is a place of chaos, overlooked. Yet the prints, they suggest haste, a moment of panic. Edmund, he was here. But was he alone?" To test this, Poirot summoned Edmund Price to the garden, where the young man stood shivering, his sandy hair falling into his eyes, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. His face was pale, his blue eyes darting nervously from Poirot to the grate as if it held some unspoken dread. "Monsieur Price," Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm, "you have told me you wandered in the garden for air, yet your shoes, they betray you. These prints, they lead to the ventilation grate, the very place where the score may have been removed. Explain, if you please, why you were here and what you saw." Edmund's shoulders slumped, and he bit his lip, his voice barely audible. I didn't lie, Mr. Poirot. I was in the garden, yes, but I didn't take the score. I swear it. I was upset after my lesson with Mr. Langston. He'd criticized my work again, said my motifs for the symphony were adequate but uninspired. I needed to get out, to think. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the quiver in Edmund's voice. "And you chose this garden, near the music room, where your mentor worked. Curious, none? Did you see anyone else here? Perhaps someone near the grate?" Edmund hesitated, his eyes flickering with something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. I I saw someone, but it was dark, a shadow, moving near the wall. I thought it was a servant, maybe, or I don't know. I didn't stay long. I went back inside when I heard the scream. Poirot's mustache quivered. A shadow, you say? And you did not investigate? A young man, curious, devoted to his mentor, sees a figure near the music room and does nothing. Edmund's face flushed, and he looked away, his hands clenching. I was scared, all right. I didn't want to get involved. Mr. Langston was always so secretive about the score. I thought, maybe he was meeting someone, hiding something. I didn't want to interfere. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. And this shadow, it was near the grate? Could it have been Maestro Fournier or Mademoiselle Vane? Edmund shook his head, his voice trembling. I don't know. It was too dark, and I was too far away. Please, Mr. Poirot, I didn't do anything wrong. Poirot's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. You saw something, Monsieur Price, and you chose silence. That's silence. It protects someone. Perhaps the killer. If you know more, you must speak, for the truth is the only path to justice. Edmund's eyes filled with tears, and he turned away, his shoulders shaking. Poirot dismissed him, watching as the young man hurried back to the house, his steps uneven on the gravel path. Hastings rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed. He's hiding something, Poirot, but he doesn't strike me as a murderer. That shadow he mentioned, could it be our thief? Oui, Hastings, Poirot replied, his eyes fixed on the disturbed patch of earth. The shadow is a clue, but Edmund's fear, it is the louder note. He saw something, perhaps enough to suspect the killer, but his loyalty, or his terror, keeps him silent. We must find this hiding place, for the score is the key to unmasking the truth. Poirot returned to the herb garden, examining the stone wall more closely. Behind a tangle of ivy, he found a loose stone, its edges worn as if recently handled. He pried it free, revealing a shallow cavity, empty but lined with dirt, suggesting something had been stored there briefly. The score was here, Poirot said, his voice low. But it has been moved again. The thief is cautious, always one step ahead. Hastings frowned, peering into the cavity. If Edmund saw someone here, why not tell us who? He's protecting someone, isn't he? Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Perhaps, or he fears retribution. The shadow he saw, it could be Fournier, Clara, or even another we have not considered. But the prints, they are Edmund's, and they tie him to this spot. We must press him further, but first we return to the house. Inside, Poirot requested a private meeting with Sir Reginald in the study, where the patron sat, his face drawn with worry. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald said, this business grows more dreadful by the hour. Have you found the score? Is young Edmund involved? Poirot's gaze was steady. The score remains hidden, Sir Reginald, but we are close. Tell me, did you ever see Edmund near the music room's exterior, perhaps in the garden, during his time here? Sir Reginald rubbed his whiskers, frowning. Edmund was often in the gardens, sketching or thinking. Victor encouraged it, said fresh air cleared the mind. But near the music room, I can't say I noticed. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. And the stone wall in the herb garden, has it been disturbed recently, to your knowledge? Sir Reginald's eyes widened. The wall? Not that I'm aware, but the gardeners have been busy with the roses. They might have moved stones, I suppose. Poirot thanked him and led Hastings back to the library, where he spread out the clues. The single sheet from Clara's room, the letter from Edmund's book, the pencil-marked page from Fournier's scores. These, he said, are fragments of the truth, but the score itself, it is the symphony's heart. The garden's secret, it points to Edmund, but also to another, the shadow he saw. We must find this hiding place, for the score is not far. To test a theory, Poirot examined the attic, as Perkins had suggested it as a place for forgotten papers. The dusty space was filled with trunks and crates, many containing old sheet music from Sir Reginald's past concerts. Poirot sifted through them, finding nothing resembling Langston's precise script, but he noted a faint scent of earth on one trunk, as if it had been near the garden. "Curious," he murmured, but not conclusive. As they descended, Poirot's thoughts turned to Edmund's fear. "The boy knows more, Hastings," he said. "His shadow, his prints, his silence, they weave a tale of complicity, but not necessarily of guilt. The garden's secret is our next note in this melody of murder." The mist began to lift, revealing the stark outlines of Ashby Hall as Poirot's little gray cells played on, seeking the hidden score and the truth it concealed. Chapter 10. The Rival's Gambit. The fourth day at Ashby Hall dawned with a brittle clarity, the mist giving way to a sharp, cold sunlight that pierced the tall windows of the conservatory. Hercule Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a charcoal suit, stood among the hothouse flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the dark mystery that enveloped the house. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his tie nervously, his honest face reflecting the strain of the investigation. The clues, Edmund's muddy prints, Fournier's ink-stained cuff, Clara's hidden satchel compartment, had woven a complex tapestry, but the missing score and the source of the cyanide remained elusive. Now, Poirot's attention turned to Clara Vane, the rival composer whose bitterness and proximity to the crime made her a shadow too persistent to ignore. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft cadence as he plucked a wilted petal from an orchid. "Clara Vane is a woman of calculation, her heart fortress of ambition and resentment. The single sheet of Langston's music in her room, the satchel with its secret compartment, these are notes in a melody of deceit. We must confront her, for the little gray cell's sense she holds a key to this crime." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. "She's a tough one, Poirot. That story about practicing her violin doesn't hold up, not with the maid seeing her near the music room. And that satchel, it's practically a confession of theft." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quickening thoughts. "Oui, but theft is not murder, Hastings. We must discern if her hand held the score, the poison, or both. Come, we shall meet her in the drawing-room, where the light of truth may pierce her defenses." The drawing-room was a grand space, its walls lined with portraits of Ashby ancestors, their stern gazes seeming to judge the living. Clara Vane sat in a high-backed chair, her auburn hair tightly coiled, her green eyes sharp and unyielding. She wore a dark green dress, its elegance undercut by the tension in her posture. The satchel rested on the floor beside her, its leather gleaming faintly in the morning light. Poirot took a seat opposite, his small hands folded neatly, while Hastings stood by the fireplace, watching closely. "Mademoiselle Vane," Poirot began, his tone calm but edged with purpose. "You have been less than candid. The maid, Elsie, saw you near the music room with this satchel, not in the guest wing as you claimed. And in your room, we found a sheet of Victor Langston's music, a fragment of his genius. These are not the actions of an innocent woman. Explain, if you please." Clara's lips curled into a faint, defiant smile. "You persist, Monsieur Poirot, but you chase phantoms. The maid is mistaken about the time. She saw me fetching my violin case, as I told you. As for the sheet of music, it was a draft Victor discarded. I kept it to study his technique, nothing more. Is it a crime to learn from a rival?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight tremor in her fingers as she spoke. "To learn, non, but to conceal, perhaps. This satchel, mademoiselle, with its hidden compartment, it is designed for secrecy. Large enough to hold a score, oui? And the maid's testimony places you near the music room at a time when the wine glass, laced with cyanide, was accessible. You had motive, opportunity, and means." Clara's smile faded, her voice sharp as a violin's highest note. "Means? You accuse me of poisoning Victor? I had no access to cyanide, Monsieur Poirot. I am a composer, not a chemist." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "Yet, mademoiselle, you spoke of cleaning jewelry, a process that sometimes involves chemicals. Cyanide, it is not so difficult to obtain for one who knows where to look. And your bitterness toward Langston, it is no secret. You believed he stole your ideas, overshadowed your talent. The symphony of the spheres. It was a triumph you could not bear to see him claim." Clara's hands clenched, her knuckles white against the dark fabric of her dress. "Yes, I hated him," she hissed, her composure cracking. "He took my motifs, my harmonies, and passed them off as his own. But murder? That's absurd. If I wanted to destroy him, I'd have done it with my own work, not with poison." Poirot's mustache quivered. "And yet, the satchel, the sheet of music, your presence near the music room, they tell a different story. Let us speak of the satchel. May I examine it again?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flashing with defiance, but she pushed the satchel toward him. "Look all you like. You'll find nothing." Poirot opened it with care, his gloved hands probing the hidden compartment he had discovered earlier. It remained empty, but he noticed a faint residue of paper dust along the lining, as if sheets had been recently removed. "This compartment," he said. "It was used recently, non? To hold something thin, flexible, like a manuscript." Clara's jaw tightened. "I told you, it's for my music, my tools. You're inventing conspiracies, Monsieur Poirot." But Poirot was not deterred. He produced the sheet of Langston's music, holding it up for her to see. "This, mademoiselle, was not discarded. It is in Langston's precise hand, a fragment of something greater. Why keep it, unless you coveted the whole?" Clara's eyes flickered, but she held his gaze. "I found it in the music room, after a rehearsal. Victor was careless, leaving scraps about. I kept it to prove he was using my ideas. It's evidence, not theft." Poirot's smile was faint, almost pitying. "Evidence or a trophy? Let us test your story. The wine glass, laced with cyanide. Did you see it during the rehearsal break, perhaps touch it?" Clara's voice was cold. "I saw it on the piano, where Victor always kept it. I didn't touch it. I had no reason to." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And yet, you were near the music room, seen by Elsie, at a time when the glass was vulnerable. One final question, mademoiselle. The garden, near the music room's grate. Have you walked there recently?" Clara's face paled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "The garden? I've no interest in herbs or roses. I keep to the house." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, watching as she rose, her satchel clutched tightly, and left the room with measured steps. Hastings approached, his expression skeptical. "She's lying, Poirot. That satchel, the music sheet, she's up to her neck in this. But why stay if she took the score?" "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "To flee would be to confess. She remains, playing the part of the wronged rival, but the little gray cells, they see through her gambit. The satchel, the music sheet, they point to theft, but the poison, it requires more." Determined to pursue the chemical thread, Poirot requested Sir Reginald's permission to search Clara's luggage more thoroughly. In her room, among neatly folded clothes and stacks of sheet music, Hastings found a small wooden box tucked beneath a shawl. Poirot opened it, revealing a vial of clear liquid labeled as a jewelry cleaner. He sniffed it cautiously, detecting a faint, acrid scent. "Cyanide," Poirot said, his voice low. "Disguised as a cleaner, but deadly. This, Hastings, is the means we sought." Hastings's eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot, she had it all along. She poisoned Langston and took the score." Poirot's expression was grave. "Perhaps, mon ami, but we must be certain. The vial proves she had access to the poison, but the score, its absence suggests she moved it, perhaps to the garden, as Edmund's prints suggest another was there. We must confront her with this." They returned to the drawing-room, where Clara sat, her composure restored. Poirot held up the vial, his voice calm but commanding. "Mademoiselle Vane, this was found in your room. A jewelry cleaner, you said, but it is cyanide. Explain, if you please." Clara's face drained of color, her hands trembling. It's for cleaning silver, not jewelry. A harmless solution used in small amounts. You can't prove it's cyanide." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "The police, they will test it, mademoiselle. And if it is cyanide, your presence near the music room, your satchel, your motive, they weave a net around you. Speak now, or the truth will speak for you." Clara rose, her eyes blazing. "You have nothing, Poirot. A vial, a sheet of music. It proves nothing." She stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice urgent. "She's guilty, isn't she? The cyanide, the satchel, it's all there." Poirot's eyes were distant, his mind weaving the clues into a pattern. "She is close to the truth, Hastings, but the score, its hiding place, eludes us. The garden, Edmund's shadow, Clara's vial, they are notes in a crescendo, but the final chord is yet to be played." The sunlight faded, casting Ashby Hall in a twilight of suspicion, as Poirot's little gray cells prepared for the final act of this deadly symphony. Chapter 11. The Final Crescendo. The fifth evening at Ashby Hall descended with a quiet intensity, the air thick with the anticipation of truth about to be unveiled. The drawing-room, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over the somber gathering, was filled with the principal players in the tragedy of Victor Langston's murder. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame radiating an authority that silenced the murmurs of Sir Reginald Ashby, Maestro Julian Fournier, Clara Vane, Edmund Price, and the assembled servants. Captain Hastings stood to his right, his honest face a mixture of awe and apprehension, knowing that Poirot's methodical mind was poised to unravel the tangled threads of motive, opportunity, and deceit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, like a conductor calling an orchestra to attention. "We have reached the final crescendo of this dark symphony. Victor Langston was murdered, poisoned by cyanide in his wine, and his masterpiece, the symphony of the spheres, was stolen from a locked room. The little gray cells. They have listened to the notes of this crime, the ink on a cuff, the mud on a shoe, the vial of poison. And now they will play the melody of truth. Sir Reginald, his whiskers trembling, leaned forward in his armchair. Monsieur Poirot, have you found the killer? And the score? Please tell me it's safe. Poirot raised a hand, his eyes gleaming. Patience, Sir Reginald. The score. It is the heart of this crime, a prize coveted for its brilliance, its legacy. But first, let us reconstruct the scene, for the truth lies in the details. He paced slowly, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. Victor Langston died in the music room, locked from within, with a glass of poisoned wine. The ventilation grate, scratched and loosened, was the path by which the score was removed. The cyanide, swift and deadly, was placed in his glass during the rehearsal break, when the room was briefly empty. 3 of you had motive, opportunity, and means: Maestro Fournier, Mademoiselle Vane, and Monsieur Price. Let us examine each note in this deadly composition. He turned to Fournier, whose flamboyant demeanor had dimmed, his dark eyes wary. Maestro, your ambition to conduct the symphony's premiere was a fire that burned brightly. You argued with Langston, handled his score, left ink on your cuff. You were in the music room at 7, when the wine glass was accessible. Yet your purchase in London was a harmless tonic, not cyanide, and your fear, when questioned, it was genuine. You desired the score, but you did not kill for it. Fournier exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief, though his hands still clutched his baton tightly. Poirot's gaze shifted to Edmund Price, who sat hunched, his sandy hair falling into his tear-streaked eyes. Monsieur Price, Poirot continued, you carried the burden of a student's devotion, tempered by frustration. Langston promised you credit as co-composer, yet his letter belittled your work. Your muddy shoes placed you in the garden, near the grate, and you saw a shadow, a figure you refused to name. Your fear, it was not of guilt, but of betrayal. You witnessed something, non? But you did not poison the wine, nor steal the score. Edmund's voice broke as he whispered, I couldn't betray him, Mr. Poirot, even now. Poirot nodded, his expression softening, before turning to Clara Vane. Her green eyes were defiant, her auburn hair a stark flame against her pale face. Mademoiselle Vane, Poirot said, his tone now sharp, you are the composer of this crime. Your jealousy of Langston's genius, your belief that he stole your ideas, it drove you to a desperate act. You were seen near the music room, carrying a satchel with a hidden compartment, perfect for concealing a score. In your room, we found a sheet of Langston's music and a vial of cyanide, disguised as a cleaner. You poisoned his wine during the rehearsal break, slipped the score through the grate, and hid it in the garden, only to retrieve it later when suspicion grew. Clara's face drained of color, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. This is nonsense, Poirot. You have no proof. A vial, a sheet of music. It means nothing. Poirot's mustache twitched, his voice rising like a crescendo. Non, mademoiselle, it means everything. The maid, Elsie, saw you near the music room at 7, not fetching your violin, but watching, waiting. The satchel's compartment held the score briefly until you moved it to the garden's stone wall, where Edmund saw your shadow. You planned to retrieve it later, to claim Langston's genius as your own, or to destroy it out of spite. But young Edmund, he saw you, and his silence was your shield. Until now. Edmund gasped, his eyes wide. I I didn't want to believe it was her. I saw her in the garden, near the grate, but I thought she was just looking for something Mr. Langston dropped. I didn't want to accuse her. Clara sprang to her feet, her voice a hiss. Lies. You can't prove I touched the wine or took the score. She lunged for the door, her satchel in hand, but Hastings, quick on his feet, blocked her path, his face stern. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. The proof, mademoiselle, is in the garden. The police, they have been summoned, and they will find the score where you hid it, behind the loose stone in the wall, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp. You moved it from the satchel when the search began, but you could not risk taking it far. Clara's defiance crumbled, her shoulders slumping as she sank back into her chair, her face a mask of defeat. I couldn't let him win again, she whispered. He took everything, my ideas, my place in the world. I slipped the cyanide into his glass during the break when he was distracted. The score. I took it through the grate to study it, to prove it was mine. But I couldn't keep it in my room, not with you sniffing about. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice held no pity. You killed a man, mademoiselle, and stole his legacy. The symphony of the spheres will be played, but not by you. Sir Reginald rose, his face ashen. The score? It's safe? Oh, thank heavens. Poirot nodded. It will be recovered, Sir Reginald, and given to one worthy of its brilliance, perhaps young Edmund, who loved Langston despite his flaws. As the police arrived, led by a stern inspector, Clara was escorted away, her head bowed, her satchel left behind like a discarded instrument. The room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling over the gathering like a final chord. Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. You did it, old chap. You saw through her from the start, didn't you? Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes distant. No, Hastings. The little gray cells. They listened, they watched, they pieced together the melody. Clara's gambit was clever, but no one can outplay the truth. The fire crackled, its warmth a small comfort, as Ashby Hall began to emerge from the shadow of murder. Its harmony restored by Poirot's relentless pursuit. Chapter 12. The score restored. The dawn of the 6th day at Ashby Hall broke with a serene clarity, the golden light filtering through the tall windows of the drawing-room, where the aftermath of Clara Vane's confession still lingered like a fading echo. Hercule Poirot stood by a grand bookcase, his small figure immaculate in a dove-gray suit, his mustache perfectly groomed, his gray eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, seated in an armchair, sipped a cup of tea, his face a mixture of relief and awe at the resolution of Victor Langston's murder. The score, the poison, the locked room, all had been unraveled, and now the house seemed to breathe easier, its shadows dispelled by the light of truth. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings with a gentle smile. The symphony of this crime has reached its finale. The score is found, the murderer unmasked, and the harmony of justice restored. Yet there is work still to be done, for the legacy of Victor Langston must not be silenced. Hastings set down his cup, his brow creasing slightly. It's a marvel, Poirot, how you pieced it all together. Clara's jealousy, the cyanide, the garden. But poor Edmund, what happens to him now? And the symphony? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his hands clasped behind his back. We shall see, Hastings. Let us gather the household one final time to ensure the melody of this resolution is clear to all. The drawing-room filled once more with the key figures. Sir Reginald Ashby, his jovial demeanor returning though tempered by grief. Maestro Julien Fournier, his flamboyance subdued, but his eyes bright with anticipation. And Edmund Price, the young student, whose pale face bore the weight of his mentor's loss, but also a flicker of hope. The servants stood at the edges, their faces a mix of curiosity and relief, while the police inspector, a dour man named Hargreaves, lingered near the door, having overseen Clara's arrest the previous night. Poirot stepped forward, his voice clear and resonant, like the final notes of a grand concerto. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the tragedy of Victor Langston's death has been resolved. Clara Vane, driven by a jealousy that consumed her soul, poisoned his wine with cyanide and stole his masterpiece, the Symphony of the Spheres, hoping to claim its brilliance or destroy it. But the little gray cells, they saw through her deception, and the score has been recovered." He gestured to a table where a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth lay under the inspector's watchful eye. "The police found it this morning, hidden behind a loose stone in the garden wall, exactly as I deduced. The score is intact, its pages untouched by the damp, a testament to Langston's genius." Sir Reginald rose, his whiskers quivering with emotion. "Thank heavens, Monsieur Poirot. That score, it's a treasure, a legacy for the ages. But what now? The premiere was to be next month, under Fournier's baton." Poirot's gaze turned to Fournier, who stood with a new-found humility. "Maestro," Poirot said, "you desired to conduct this symphony, to make it your triumph. Your ambition led you to argue with Langston, to handle his score, but you did not kill. Will you honor his work and conduct it as he intended?" Fournier bowed his head, his voice steady but soft. "Monsieur Poirot, I was a fool to let pride cloud my judgment. Victor's vision was clear, and I will conduct the symphony as he wished, with every note true to his genius. It will be my penance and my privilege." Poirot nodded, satisfied, then turned to Edmund, who sat with his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the score. "Monsieur Price," Poirot said, his tone gentle, "you carried a heavy burden, love for your mentor, pain at his criticism, fear of betraying what you saw. You witnessed Clara in the garden, yet your silence protected her until the truth could no longer be denied. Langston promised you a role in this symphony, did he not?" Edmund nodded, his voice trembling. "He said my motifs were part of it, but he never meant to give me credit. I wanted to believe in him, to make him proud. When I saw Miss Vane near the grate, I thought she was looking for something he'd lost. I couldn't bring myself to accuse her." Poirot's eyes softened, a rare warmth in their depths. "You are young, Monsieur Price, and your heart is true. The score, it contains your motifs. As Sir Reginald confirmed, you shall have your place in its legacy. I propose that you work with Maestro Fournier to complete any unfinished sections, to ensure Langston's vision is realized." Edmund's eyes widened, tears brimming. "Me? But I'm not ready. I'm just a student." Poirot smiled, his mustache curving upward. "No, you are a composer, with a spark of genius Langston saw, even if he did not fully nurture it. The Symphony of the Spheres will be your teacher now, and you will honor your mentor by bringing it to life." Sir Reginald clapped his hands, his face alight with enthusiasm. "Splendid, Poirot. Edmund, my boy, you'll have every resource at my disposal. The premiere will be a triumph for Victor and for you." Fournier extended a hand to Edmund, his earlier arrogance replaced by respect. "I will guide you, Edmund, as Victor would have wished, Together, we will make this symphony soar." Edmund shook his hand, his face a mixture of fear and determination, as if stepping into a new movement of his life. The servants murmured their approval, and even Inspector Hargreaves offered a curt nod, his stern demeanor softened by the resolution. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The score is restored, mon ami, not just in paper, but in spirit. Langston's genius will live on, through those who loved and learned from him, despite his flaws." Hastings grinned, his relief palpable. "You've done it again, Poirot. You took a mess of clues, mud, ink, cyanide, and turned it into harmony. How do you do it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, his hands spreading in a modest gesture. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they listen to the human heart. It is a complex instrument, full of passion, pain, and secrets. But with order and method, even the darkest melody can be resolved." As the household dispersed, Sir Reginald promising a grand rehearsal to come, Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart Ashby Hall. The police had taken Clara's vial for testing, confirming it as cyanide, and her confession had sealed her fate. The score, now in Sir Reginald's safe, awaited its moment to shine. Outside, the sun climbed higher, banishing the last traces of mist. Poirot paused on the gravel drive, his gaze distant. "The human heart, Hastings," he said. "It is like a symphony, beautiful, chaotic, and full of hidden notes. But with patience, we find the truth, and the music plays on." They climbed into the waiting car, the engine humming as it carried them away from St. Mary's Mead, leaving behind a house where harmony had been restored, and a score that would sing once more.